They fired me with a 3-sentence email after 22 years of loyalty. My name is Lawrence Pemberton, and I'm 52 years old. For 22 years, I dedicated my life to Reynolds and Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm based in downtown Denver. I believed that loyalty, hard work, and delivering results would speak louder than office politics. I was wrong. I started there fresh out of University of Colorado's business school in 2002, 30 years old and hungry to prove myself. Over the years, I climbed from junior analyst to senior vice president of strategic partnerships. I had a corner office on the 28th floor with a view of the Rocky Mountains. My annual salary was $295,000, plus bonuses that could reach another $165,000 in good years. Not bad for a kid from Akron who grew up in a 2-bedroom house with parents who both worked factory jobs. The company specialized in corporate restructuring and merger advisory services. We weren't Goldman Sachs, but we had carved out a solid niche in the Mountain West market. Our clients trusted us because we delivered, and for over 2 decades, I was one of the main reasons why. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists like this video, and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. Gregory Ashford became CEO in 2020. At 61, he was everything I wasn't. Politically savvy, charming with investors, and ruthless when it suited him. He had silver hair that he kept perfectly styled, wore $2,000 suits, and drove a black BMW X7 worth over $125,000. I respected his business acumen, but I never fully trusted him. There was something in his eyes during board meetings, a calculating coldness that made me uncomfortable. The opportunity that changed everything came in February of 2024. Apex Technologies, a software company based in Dallas, was looking to acquire a smaller firm to expand their operations into the financial services sector. The total deal value was just over $1. $4 billion, the largest merger our company had ever handled. Gregory saw dollar signs. The commission alone would be worth $16. $8 million to Reynolds and Associates. He assigned me to lead the due diligence process. For 7 months, I worked 18-hour days reviewing financial statements, conducting management interviews, and coordinating with lawyers from both sides. I flew to Dallas 11 times, spending countless hours in conference rooms that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. My wife, Rebecca, barely saw me during those months. Our 17-year-old daughter, Sophie, started calling me the ghost dad because I was never home for dinner. But I didn't complain. This was what I lived for, the complex dance of corporate negotiations, the satisfaction of solving problems that others couldn't handle. I was good at my job, and I knew it. Now, here's something most people don't understand about corporate mergers. The amount of documentation is staggering. Every email, every phone call, every meeting, it all gets recorded and filed away. Over the years, I'd learned to keep my own copies of everything. Call it paranoia, call it professional survival. I had gigabytes of data spanning nearly 2 decades stored on encrypted drives at home. During the Apex deal, this habit intensified. I had senior-level access to company servers, and our compliance department required recording all client calls anyway. My assistant, Jennifer Walsh, had been with me for 8 years. She knew I needed copies of interdepartmental communications to stay on top of things. What looked like standard practice would later become the foundation of Gregory's downfall. The Apex Technologies executives respected me. Their CFO, Catherine Brooks, once told me over drinks at the Ritz-Carlton in Dallas that I was the most thorough analyst they'd ever worked with. Everything was proceeding smoothly. The merger was scheduled to close in mid-September 2024, just 7 weeks away. Both companies had signed letters of intent. The regulatory approvals were in place. I had personally verified every aspect of the deal structure, from the tax implications to the employee retention packages. That's when Gregory decided I was a problem. On a Wednesday morning in early August 2024, I was in my office reviewing the final contract amendments when my computer chimed with a new email. The sender was Gregory's assistant, Margaret Fuller. The subject line read, "Employment Status Update." I opened it expecting some routine HR communication about vacation policies or the company picnic. Instead, I found 4 sentences that would change my life forever. Dear Mr. Pemberton, effective immediately, your employment with Reynolds and Associates has been terminated. Please collect your personal belongings and surrender your company equipment to security before leaving the building today. A severance package will be discussed separately. Yours truly, Margaret Fuller, Executive Assistant to the CEO. I read it 3 times. Then I looked at the timestamp, 10:15 a.m. I glanced at my watch, 10:18 a.m. 3 minutes. That's how long it took for 22 years of my life to be reduced to corporate boilerplate. You know that feeling when you get punched in the gut and can't breathe for a second? That's exactly what this was like. 22 years of loyalty, of building relationships, of making this company millions of dollars, reduced to 4 sentences from an assistant. The betrayal was so complete, so unexpected, that I actually felt physically sick. But here's the thing about shock. It doesn't last long when you're used to thinking analytically. Within minutes, my brain shifted into problem-solving mode. If Gregory thought he could toss me aside like yesterday's newspaper, he had seriously miscalculated the kind of man he was dealing with. I sat there staring at my computer screen, feeling like I'd been sucker punched. The office continued its normal rhythm around me. Phones ringing, printers humming, colleagues discussing weekend plans. Nobody knew that my world had just imploded in the span of 3 minutes. My first instinct was to storm into Gregory's office and demand an explanation, but something stopped me. Maybe it was all those years navigating corporate politics, or maybe it was pure survival instinct kicking in. Either way, I closed my laptop and took a deep breath. I walked to Gregory's office. His door was closed, but through the glass partition I could see him on a conference call, gesturing animatedly with his hands. Margaret sat at her desk outside, typing away as if she hadn't just nuked someone's career. When she saw me approaching, her face went white as paper. "Is he available?" I asked calmly. He's in a very important call with Apex Technologies," she stammered. "Maybe later this afternoon?" "I see." I nodded and smiled. "No problem, I'll wait." I sat in one of the leather chairs outside his office and pulled out my phone. For 25 minutes, I watched Gregory through the glass. He was animated, confident, probably discussing deal points with the Apex executives. He glanced at me once and I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt? Fear? Hard to say. When he finally emerged from his office, straightening his tie, he looked genuinely surprised to see me still sitting there. "Lawrence, I heard you got some news today," he said, his voice carrying that fake sympathy that executives practice in the mirror. "I did," I replied, standing up. 22 years, Gregory. I think I deserved better than an email from your assistant." He glanced around the reception area, suddenly aware of the other employees nearby. "Let's talk in my office." We walked in, and he closed the door behind us. His office was twice the size of mine, with a mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. On the wall behind him hung his MBA diploma from Wharton and several photos of him shaking hands with various politicians and business leaders. "Look, Lawrence, these decisions are never easy," he began, settling into his executive chair. "But with the Apex merger moving forward, we need to restructure the team. Bring in some fresh perspectives." "Fresh perspectives," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" The board felt it was time for a change in leadership on this project. I almost laughed out loud. "The board, Gregory? I've been in every board meeting for the past 4 years. Half of them don't even understand what we do here." His jaw tightened slightly. "The decision has been made. Your severance package will be generous. 8 months' salary plus accrued vacation time. Margaret will have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. 8 months' salary. That was it. After 22 years of building relationships, closing deals, and making this company millions of dollars, I was worth 8 months' pay." "I understand," I said quietly. He looked surprised at my calm response. "Good. I'm glad you're taking this professionally." "Of course, I've learned a lot working here." I stood up and extended my hand. "I wish you and the company all the best with the Apex deal." He shook my hand, relief washing over his face. "I appreciate that, Lawrence. I really do." I walked back to my office and began packing my personal items. 25 minutes later, I was carrying a cardboard box to the elevator, past colleagues who suddenly found their shoes very interesting because word travels fast in corporate environments. The security guard, Frank Rodriguez, walked me to my car. We'd chatted hundreds of times over the years about his daughter's soccer games. "Sorry about this, Mr. Pemberton," he said as I loaded the box into my Honda Pilot. "This doesn't seem right." "Don't worry about it, Frank. Things have a way of working out." That evening, I sat in my home office in our house in Littleton, staring at the box of belongings I'd brought from work. Rebecca was making dinner in the kitchen, and I could hear Sophie practicing violin upstairs. Normal family sounds, but nothing felt normal anymore. I opened my laptop and began going through the files I'd accumulated over the years. Most executives keep copies of important documents on personal drives. It's not technically allowed, but it's standard practice for anyone who's been burned by corporate politics before. The process of connecting the dots started methodically. I began with the timeline, creating a detailed chronology of events leading up to my termination. When had Gregory's behavior toward me changed? When had certain communications stopped flowing through my desk? When had those urgent meetings begun happening without me? As I scrolled through folders, something caught my attention. It was a folder labeled Apex Internal Communications that I'd created months earlier. Inside were email threads, recorded phone conversations, and meeting notes that painted a very different picture of the merger than what had been presented to the board and shareholders. The pattern emerged slowly, then hit me like a freight train. There were emails between Gregory and Apex CEO Timothy Walsh discussing the elimination of potential obstacles to the merger. There was a recorded conference call where Gregory had explicitly stated that certain senior employees would need to be moved aside before the deal could proceed smoothly. Most damning was a series of text messages between Gregory and his brother-in-law, Carl Brennan, who happened to be a major shareholder in Apex Technologies. They had discussed how Gregory would receive a $8 million personal bonus separate from the company's commission once the merger was complete. This bonus was contingent on the deal closing without any complications or delays. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal and calculated. As I read through the communications, I felt the last bit of respect I'd held for Gregory evaporate completely. This wasn't business. This was greed dressed up as strategy. He'd eliminated me not because of performance or restructuring, but because I represented the one person who might ask uncomfortable questions about the deal's irregularities. Suddenly, my termination made perfect sense. Gregory hadn't fired me because of restructuring or fresh perspectives. He'd fired me because I knew too much about the deal's irregularities, and he couldn't risk me raising questions that might delay or derail the merger. My job, my loyalty, my 22 years of service, none of it mattered compared to his personal payday. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time in hours. Gregory thought he'd eliminated a problem. What he'd actually done was create a much bigger one. The next morning I woke up at my usual time, 6:30 a.m. But instead of rushing to get dressed for work, I made coffee and sat on our back porch. It was a beautiful August morning in Littleton. The birds were singing, and my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was already working in her garden. For the first time in months, I had nowhere urgent to be. Rebecca found me there an hour later, still in my pajamas and reading the Denver Post on my iPad. "How are you feeling?" she asked, settling into the chair beside me. "Surprisingly good," I said, and I meant it. "I've been thinking about what happened yesterday, and I realize Gregory may have done me a favor." She raised an eyebrow. "A favor, Lawrence? He fired you by email." "He did, and in doing so, he made a very expensive mistake. I didn't elaborate, and she didn't push." Rebecca had learned over the years that when I had that particular tone in my voice, calm but determined, it was better to let me work through whatever was brewing in my mind. Over the next 4 days, I organized my evidence like I was preparing for the trial of the century. I created secure folders on encrypted drives and began documenting everything I knew about the Apex merger, the irregular communications, the undisclosed personal payments, the conflicts of interest, the timeline of events that led to my termination. But I didn't act immediately. That would have been emotional, reactive. Instead, I did something Gregory never expected. I waited and watched. On Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after my termination, I received a call from Catherine Brooks, Apex Technologies' CFO. "Lawrence, I hope you don't mind me calling your personal number," she said. "I got it from your business card. I heard about what happened at Reynolds & Associates, and I wanted to reach out." "I appreciate that, Catherine. How are things progressing with the merger?" "That's actually why I'm calling." Her voice sounded strained. "We've hit some complications in the final review process. There are some documentation gaps that nobody seems able to address. Gregory keeps assuring us everything is fine, but my team is getting nervous." I smiled to myself. What kind of documentation gaps? Compliance records, regulatory filings, some financial reconciliation reports that were supposed to be part of the due diligence package, the items you usually handled. "Gregory says he's bringing in external consultants to fill the gaps, but it's already been 6 days and we haven't seen any progress." "That sounds frustrating." "It is, Lawrence. I know this might be awkward given your situation, but would you be willing to meet with me? Off the record, I'd value your perspective on how to move forward." We met that Thursday afternoon at a Starbucks in downtown Dallas. I'd flown down on Southwest Airlines, coach this time paying my own way. Catherine looked tired, stressed in a way I'd never seen during our previous interactions. "The merger is supposed to close next Tuesday," she said after ordering her second espresso, "but we're missing critical pieces of documentation." When I asked Gregory about it, He either changes the subject or tells me not to worry about minor technicalities. What does your legal team say? They're recommending we delay the closing until everything is properly documented, but Gregory is pushing hard for us to proceed as scheduled. He says any delay could jeopardize the entire deal. I nodded thoughtfully. Catherine, can I ask you something? Have you had any direct communication with Gregory outside of official channels? Personal phone calls, text messages, anything like that? Her expression changed. Why would you ask that? Just curious about his communication style these days. She studied my face for a long moment. Lawrence, is there something I should know? This was the moment. I could have told her everything right then about Gregory's personal financial incentives, about his brother-in-law's involvement, about the systematic elimination of anyone who might raise uncomfortable questions. But that would have been too direct, too obvious. Instead, I chose a different approach. Catherine, in my 22 years at Reynolds & Associates, I've learned that when someone is unusually eager to rush through complex processes, it's worth asking why. What's the hurry? Gregory says market conditions might change if we wait too long. Market conditions for a software merger in August 2024? I raised an eyebrow. The tech sector has been stable for months. What specific conditions is he concerned about? She didn't have an answer, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. Lawrence, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to verify the integrity of the due diligence process, what would they look for? Hypothetically, I'd want to see all communications between the parties, email threads, recorded calls, meeting transcripts. I'd want to understand if everyone involved has properly disclosed any personal financial interests in the outcome. And I'd want to know if any key personnel were removed from the process at critical moments, and why. Her coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Removed how? Well, imagine if someone who knew all the details of the deal suddenly wasn't available to answer questions during the final review process. That might be worth investigating. We talked for another hour. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I didn't reveal any specific information. I simply asked questions that any experienced CFO would want answers to. By the time we shook hands outside the Starbucks, Catherine had a very different look in her eyes. Thank you for your time, Lawrence, she said. This has been enlightening. I'm always happy to help. That evening, I flew back to Denver and waited. I didn't have to wait long. On Friday morning, my phone rang. It was Margaret Fuller, Gregory's assistant. Lawrence, Mr. Ashford would like to speak with you. Are you available for a call this afternoon? Of course, I said. What time works for him? He'd prefer to meet in person. Could you come to the office around 3 p.m.? Interesting. A face-to-face meeting meant Gregory was either very angry or very worried. Possibly both. I arrived at Reynolds & Associates at exactly 3 p.m. Sir, you wearing the same navy blue suit I'd worn to hundreds of client meetings over the years. Frank Rodriguez nodded at me from the security desk but looked confused about why I was there. Margaret escorted me to Gregory's office. He was standing by his window, looking out at the Denver skyline. When he turned around, I could see the stress written all over his face. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. Lawrence, thank you for coming in. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath. No problem. What can I do for you? I understand you had coffee with Catherine Brooks yesterday. There it was. Someone had told him about our meeting. I wasn't surprised. In corporate deals this size, information travels at the speed of light. I confirmed. She reached out to me. We've worked together for months, so it seemed natural for her to want to discuss the transition. What did you discuss? I pretended to think about it. She mentioned some documentation concerns, gaps in the due diligence package. She seemed stressed about the timeline. Gregory's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And what did you tell her? I told her that these kinds of issues are normal in complex mergers. I suggested she work with the current team to resolve any concerns. He relaxed slightly. Good, that's good advice. But then I added, I did mention that if she had specific questions about documentation I'd prepared over the past few months, she might want to request access to all the original files, just to ensure nothing was missed in the transition. The color drained from Gregory's face like someone had pulled a plug. Gregory stared at me for what felt like an eternity. I could practically hear the gears grinding in his head as he processed what I'd just said. Access to all the original files. He knew exactly what that meant. Lawrence, I think there may have been a misunderstanding about your termination, he said finally, attempting to regain his composure. Perhaps we acted too hastily. The company could benefit from your continued involvement in the Apex merger. Really? Last week you told me the board wanted fresh perspectives. Yes, well, the board has reconsidered. We'd like to offer you a consulting position. Same salary, full benefits, just until the merger closes. I pretended to think about it. That's generous, Gregory, but I'm not sure I'm the right fit anymore. Of course you are. You know this deal better than anyone. His voice had taken on a desperate edge. Name your price. It's not about money. Then what? What do you want? I looked him straight in the eye. I want the truth. His face went pale again. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. We stared at each other across his mahogany desk. In that moment, I think he realized that I knew everything about the personal payments, about his brother-in-law, about the real reason for my termination. Lawrence, whatever you think you know. My phone rang, interrupting him. It was Catherine Brooks. Excuse me, I said to Gregory, then answered the call. Hi, Catherine. Lawrence, I'm sorry to bother you, but we need to talk urgently. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I have some questions about the documentation you mentioned. Of course, what time? 8 a.m. at our Dallas office. I'll be there. I hung up and looked at Gregory. He was gripping the edge of his desk so tightly his knuckles had turned white. That was Catherine Brooks, I said casually. She wants to discuss some documentation issues. Apparently, the gaps are bigger than initially thought. Gregory stood up abruptly. Lawrence, I need you to understand something. This merger is critical for everyone at this company. If it falls through, we'll have to lay off 35% of our staff. Good people will lose their jobs. That would be unfortunate. These are people with families, mortgages, kids in college. Don't let your personal feelings about me hurt innocent people. I stood up as well. Gregory, I've never let personal feelings interfere with business decisions. That's the difference between us. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Gregory, you might want to prepare some answers for Catherine's questions. She strikes me as the thorough type. I left him standing there in his office, probably calculating how quickly his world was about to collapse. The next morning, I flew to Dallas for what turned out to be the most satisfying meeting of my career. Catherine had assembled her entire legal and finance team in Apex Technology's largest conference room. The walls were lined with whiteboards covered in deal timelines and financial projections. Lawrence, thank you for coming, Catherine said as I entered. After our conversation on Thursday, my team did some additional research into the merger documentation. We discovered some concerning inconsistencies. For the next 3 hours, I answered their questions with complete honesty and transparency. I walked them through every aspect of the due diligence process, explained the significance of missing documents, and provided context for communications they'd found confusing. When they asked about conflicts of interest, I told them about Gregory's undisclosed personal financial incentives. When they asked about the timeline for my termination, I explained how it coincided with their final review requests. When they asked if I had documentation to support my statements, I told them I'd be happy to provide whatever they needed. By noon, Catherine's team had made their decision. We're postponing the merger indefinitely, Catherine announced, pending a full investigation into the circumstances surrounding this deal. I flew back to Denver that afternoon feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone was buzzing constantly with calls from Gregory, Margaret, and even some board members, but I didn't answer. There was nothing left to discuss. The story broke in the Denver Business Journal the following Wednesday. Reynolds and Associates CEO under investigation for merger fraud. The article detailed the undisclosed conflicts of interest, the suspicious timing of key personnel changes, and the documentation irregularities that had derailed the $4 billion deal. By the end of that week, Gregory had been terminated by the board and was facing SEC investigations. The merger with Apex Technologies was officially canceled. Reynolds and Associates' stock price dropped 45%, and the company was forced to lay off 75 employees. But here's the interesting part. Apex Technologies offered me a position as their director of strategic acquisitions. My starting salary was $340,000 plus a signing bonus of $95,000. They wanted someone with integrity to lead their future merger activities. I accepted. On my first day at Apex Technologies in early September 2024, I received an email from Margaret Fuller. She'd been let go when Reynolds and Associates downsized, but she'd found a new job with a smaller consulting firm. Her message was brief, Mr. Pemberton, I wanted you to know that I never felt right about sending that termination email. I'm glad things worked out for you. You always treated everyone with respect, regardless of their position. That's rare in corporate America. I replied with a simple, thank you, Margaret. I wish you all the best in your new role. 2 weeks later, I ran into Frank Rodriguez, the security guard from Reynolds and Associates, at a Broncos game. He'd found work at a downtown law firm and seemed happy. Mr. Pemberton, he called out as I walked past his section. "How are you doing?" "Great, Frank. How about you?" "Can't complain." He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Hey, I heard about what happened with Mr. Ashford and all that business. Crazy stuff. It was certainly unexpected. Between you and me, a lot of us saw it coming. Guy always acted like he was better than everyone else. But you always remembered my daughter's name, asked about her games. That says something about a person's character." I smiled. "Thanks, Frank. That means a lot." As I walked back to my seat, I thought about the past month. I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't planning elaborate schemes or public humiliation. Sometimes it's simply allowing the truth to surface naturally. Sometimes it's maintaining your integrity while others destroy themselves with their own greed and dishonesty. Gregory had fired me because he saw me as an obstacle to his personal enrichment. He thought eliminating me would clear his path to a $8 million payday. Instead, he'd removed the one person who might have helped him navigate the legitimate concerns that eventually sank the deal. His own actions had been his downfall. I just helped shine a light on them. These days, I sleep better at night. I work for a company that values ethics and transparency. My wife, Rebecca, says I seem happier, more relaxed. My daughter, Sophie, now 18, told me she's proud of how I handled all that drama at your old job. Gregory, from what I hear, is working for a small consulting firm in Phoenix, making less than half his former salary. The SEC investigation resulted in fines and professional sanctions that effectively ended his corporate career. I don't take pleasure in his misfortune, but I also don't regret the choices I made. In business, as in life, integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when people are watching. It's about building a foundation strong enough to support you when everything else falls apart. My 22 years at Reynolds & Associates had taught me that lesson, even if I didn't realize it at the time. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply people try to bury it. And when it does, you want to be standing on solid ground. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.